Well, welcome everyone to this next One Georgia Town Hall meeting. I am honored to introduce to y'all a friend of mine who's moderating this evening's discussion, State Representative Spencer Frye of Athens-Clarke County. Spencer, thank you so much for being here.
Hey, thanks, John. I appreciate you having me, and thanks for all the good work you're doing. You know, this is going to be great. We've got a awesome evening. Thank you for coming to the One Georgia Town Hall with Democratic U.S. Senate nominee Jon Ossoff and who's challenging GOP Senator David Perdue, who's going to win. John, you're going to win this race, and I'm really excited to be here with you. Look, you know, we're talking about tonight. I like to hear what you're thinking. We're going to take live questions. If you have a question and you're joining on Facebook Live, comment below, and we can get in as many as we can. And you know, I've seen these before where we're trying to get all the questions in, John. So, you know, enough of the pleasantries. Let's get right to the meat of the issues here. And our first question is going to come from Charles in Atlanta. And, you know, he's asking, how vital is it that we develop a comprehensive plan to stop the spread of COVID-19? I think that question is on a lot of people's minds.
Yeah, absolutely, Spencer. And hey, Charles, thank you for the question. And hey, everybody in Atlanta. The bottom line is that the federal government has totally failed to contain this virus. And it didn't have to be this way. But months of denials, months of dragging feet, months of ignoring medical experts let this thing rampage out of control across the country. And that has cost many lives. Now, nearly 180,000 Americans killed by COVID-19. And the economic devastation is massive. And this is the consequence of weak political leadership that is so consumed by its short-term political interest. And folks like Senator Perdue, who are so consumed by their loyalty to one man, Donald Trump, that public health expertise in a public health emergency is ignored. The response is politicized, botched, and the results are catastrophic. And we're not going to be able to restore economic growth sustainably and get back to full employment until we really control the spread of this disease. And that's why we need to elect new leadership that will implement public health best practices. Look, in a pandemic, you want policymakers to implement the recommendations of public health experts. It's not that complicated. And no politician is responsible for the emergence of a deadly virus like this, but politicians are responsible for the quality of the government's response. And the folks who are running the country right now have failed the people of the state of Georgia. They've failed the American people. They don't deserve to be reelected. And we have an opportunity and an obligation in November to elect people who will take this seriously, save lives, and get this economy growing again.
No, thank you for that answer and that a bit of leadership. And I think that's going to offer some great hope to a lot of people here in Athens. And so our next question is Deborah from Rincon asks, will you work for the betterment of the people of Georgia and improve their access to healthcare? I know that's something that we have constantly battled at the state level. We had a hospital close up in Commerce recently, which is going to put more pressure during the pandemic on the hospitals here locally in Athens. So what can we do about expanding access to quality care?
Yeah, thank you, Deborah, for the question. And I just want to encourage everyone again, if you have questions for us, drop them into the comments or the replies. Apologies in advance that we won't be able to get to all of them, but we'll do our best. And Spencer, Deborah is asking a question about access to healthcare that's so important here in Georgia. And it's a solvable problem, the lack of access to healthcare in Georgia. This is something that we can fix with strong leadership. We need to invest in new clinics in underserved areas to make primary care and preventative care, urgent and pediatric care accessible and convenient for everybody in this state. You shouldn't have to drive an hour to see a primary care physician in Georgia. You shouldn't have to drive 3 hours to get to a level 1 trauma center if you're in a car accident or suffer some serious injury. But we've seen the continued closure of rural hospitals in this state, in large part because our states refuse to expand Medicaid. The leaders of our state government and my opponent, Senator Perdue, have all opposed expanding Medicaid, even though it would help hundreds of thousands of Georgians afford health care and help keep rural hospitals open. That's got to change. And in the Senate, I will support Medicaid expansion. I will deliver federal resources for those clinics that are vitally needed in underserved areas. I'll deliver resources to help sustain and keep our rural hospitals open. We need to work on those reimbursement rates through Medicare and Medicaid so that hospitals get the revenues they need to sustain themselves. And we also have to solve the underinsurance problem. We have two big problems with healthcare in Georgia. One is lack of access, the other is lack of insurance. And we only solve our healthcare crisis by tackling both. So as we build access by building clinics and expanding the public health service, bringing more doctors and nurses and nurse practitioners to work in our state, we also have to get everyone covered by great insurance. And that means Medicaid expansion. That means giving people the option of buying into a nonprofit public option, which will compete with private plans. And it means for folks on private plans, strengthening protections for people with pre-existing conditions like asthma, diabetes, and hypertension, while cracking down on this outrageous price gouging by prescription drug companies and insurance companies who are ripping off the people of this state every day. And they're doing it with the permission of politicians like David Perdue, who are funded by those industries. We can solve these problems. We have to elect new leadership to do it.
We certainly do. A lot of the R&D that goes into some of these drugs that they're paying, that we're paying exorbitant prices for, are actually being funded by the taxpayer dollars in the first place. So
that's a great point, Spencer. That's a great point. And remdesivir, which was one of the most promising early therapies tested for COVID-19. $70 million of taxpayer money went in developing that drug. And then Gilead Sciences turned around, wanted to charge Americans $3,200 a course. The people already paid to develop the medicine. And in a pandemic, you're trying to charge us $3,000. It's outrageous. It's corruption.
That's right. That's right. Thank you, John. Okay, good. We've got a question from Dawn from Athens. Hey, Dawn. She wants to know, John, what are you going to do as a senator to unite the racial divide in Georgia and the rest of the nation? That's pretty tough. A lot of things are going on right now, and that's a tough question, and it's a tough problem to solve.
Yes, it is. And we need right now unifying and healing political leadership that will bring us together as one people to address the deep race and class bias, for example, in our criminal justice system. We saw in Wisconsin a man shot in the back 7 times in front of his children. We've seen so often, again and again and again, that the premature and excessive and inappropriate use of deadly force, we're talking about violence that takes people's lives. And it's so often African Americans who are targets and victims of the excessive use of force in our criminal justice system. The thing is that there's broad public support for criminal justice reform and for reforming policing in this country so there's accountability where there's excessive use of force, so that we can rebuild trust between communities and law enforcement. And of course, tackling the impact of racism in American society extends far beyond just criminal justice reform. We have to look at deep inequities in our financial system, whether it's inequitable access to capital, predatory lending, the redlining practices that made it so much more difficult for Black families to own homes, the inequities in education, where resources for public education are tied to a community's wealth rather than equitably distributed to all of the children and young people in our society. And while we frankly and openly and honestly grapple with the impact of the racism that is institutionalized and historically embedded, we can come together and remember and affirm that we're all in this together, that our common humanity is what binds us. Our common identity as Americans binds us and should inspire us to want to solve these problems so that everybody in this country has a fair shot, so that there is truly equal justice and equal protection under the law for every American, regardless of race, regardless of wealth, regardless of their political connections.
No, it's some great points. And I mean, liberty and justice for all. That's what we've said since we were little kids in school. And we definitely need to be working on carrying that out. So we're going to take a question from Facebook Live. Now, here's a good one. All right, you ready? Braden asks, how do you plan to win over voters in rural or more conservative areas? Because that's being raised in South Mississippi, how can we reach those folks who have different views of the cities than folks that are more used to the urban areas, really?
Hey, Braden, thanks so much for the question. And it's an important one. How do we unite the people of this state from every region, in rural Georgia, suburban communities, urban areas? How do we unite the people of this state to elect leaders who will enact policies that benefit us all? That's the question. And the agenda that I am humbly submitting to the people of the state is one that benefits everybody in this state, wherever we live. We have a public health crisis and a healthcare affordability crisis in Georgia, a healthcare access crisis in Georgia that impacts rural Georgians in particular, but also Georgians in underserved urban and suburban communities. Every single family in this state benefits when we lower the cost of prescription drugs and health insurance, when we build more clinics and bring more frontline healthcare workers to deliver vital healthcare services here, when we stop the drug companies from charging us an arm and a leg for life-saving medicines so families are having to choose between rent and their prescriptions, when we stop the insurance companies from throwing people off their coverage because they have asthma or diabetes or high blood pressure, that benefits us all. So will significant investment in infrastructure, which we vitally need. We can revitalize and rebuild and recover economically in every region of Georgia with an ambitious infrastructure program that will help us connect our state, that will extend broadband into rural areas where service is still spotty, that will make Georgia a leading producer of solar energy in this country, that will help our farmers adapt to our changing climate, that will help our coastal areas deal with increased storm surge and high winds from tropical storms, that will increase as climate change becomes worse, that will help us become more sustainable in how we grow our economy, that will link every part of this state and link our state with other states and metro areas across the entire Southeast region. We will all benefit from investment in infrastructure, and we will all benefit when we reform our broken campaign finance system and get dark money and corporate money out of politics so that our elected leaders pursue our interests, the public's interest, and not just the interests of their donors. I think that that is an agenda and a platform that unites Georgians. It will help us all to live better and healthier and more prosperous lives. And that's the message that I'm taking to every corner of the state.
Yeah, what a great answer. And, we have a similar question is based, on the assistance that a lot of small businesses were unable to access when the pandemic hit. And Lori from Midland asks, what will you do to assist the small businesses and ensure that it makes it to them instead of the big companies that we were reading about in the paper?
Yeah, thank you, Lori, for the question. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for participating. So the PPP program, which benefited many small businesses here in Georgia, hasn't been reauthorized by the US Senate. Small businesses are continuing to struggle. Business is down, revenues are down. The purpose, in large part, of that PPP program was to help these companies sustain payroll so we didn't have to lay people off during this pandemic. But that program now has to be reauthorized by Congress. And the US Senate, including my opponent, Senator David Perdue, is on vacation. And to your point, Lori, when that program is reauthorized, they've got to stop huge corporations from poaching those resources, because those funds were raided by large firms who weren't the intended recipients. This gets back to the discussion about corruption in politics. When we want to understand who has power in our economy and our society, look at who gets the fastest and the most help when a crisis hits. Right now, in part due to action Congress has taken and because of what the Federal Reserve is doing, Wall Street banks and major corporate borrowers are getting basically limitless emergency cash every day. But small businesses whose lifeline has been shut off and who don't have access to, corporate debt markets and deep cash reserves, mom and pop Main Street businesses who relied on customers walking in, and those customers still aren't coming because this virus is out of control, their help is on hold while Senator David Perdue takes an unearned summer vacation. What's that all about? Well, it's because those major corporations and investment banks who are getting all this help all the time, they're the ones who cut the big campaign checks, not the coffee shop or the restaurant or the bookstore or the mechanic on the corner. Those entrepreneurs, those small business owners who have to meet payroll every week, who have seen their business plummet, they can't afford $7,500 to pay David Perdue for 4 meetings a year and sip champagne in his mansion on a private island, like the lobbyists from Washington do. Mark my words, if the stock valuations of the 8 or 9 largest investment banks in America right now were plummeting, the Senate would be back in session instantaneously. But when it's small businesses withering while federal support has expired, the Senate's happy to take a holiday. That's because of the corruption in our political system. It's wrong, and I will put families and small businesses ahead of powerful corporations and political donors.
That's great to hear. That's great to hear. I think people need to hear that message. Like Linda from Decatur is asking, what are you going to do to protect Social Security and Medicare? That seems to be an issue with a lot of the seniors. I think we've been hearing about this for a while now. So what about the Social Security and Medicare?
Yeah, hey, Linda, thank you for the question. I will defend Social Security and Medicare, which are right now under attack. President Trump's talking about taking steps that could deplete Social Security within just a few years. And this has been on the chopping block for folks like Mitch McConnell and David Perdue for a long time. These hard-earned benefits that seniors have paid into and invested in for their entire lives, there are a lot of people in Washington who want to cut them, who want to force seniors into stock saving accounts, private healthcare accounts. Cutting Social Security and Medicare has been a dream of the right wing in Washington for a very long time. I won't let it happen. And it's interesting because folks like Senator Perdue, they don't ask questions about where the money's going to come from when it's bailouts for Wall Street and their corporate donors. But as soon as we start talking about ensuring that our seniors aren't destitute or homeless or without medical care, suddenly they say there's no money. Washington seems always to be able to find money for bailouts or for war or for tax breaks for the wealthiest political donors. But then when it comes to helping ordinary people, They want to slash and burn. And once again, that reflects the corruption in our political system. So, Linda, you have my word that I will defend Social Security and Medicare and those hard-earned benefits for our seniors. Thanks for the question.
No, I think, and you raised great points, John. Those are earned benefits. It's not a gift. We've been paying into the system the whole time, and they treat it like they can take it away, but that's your money. And glad to hear that. Look at this. We have Mocha Johnson from Athens is on Facebook Live with us, and she says, if I may, she's actually running for a state house district. And Mocha, hey Mocha, glad to see you. And she says affordable housing continues to be an issue for many who lack access to loans and become stuck as renters. And she recently had to move out of her apartment due to increased rent. And what can we do to make it easier for people like her to generate wealth and reduce the wealth gap through home ownership?
Yeah, Mocha, thank you for tuning in. Thanks for the question. And I do want to give a special shout out to Mocha. And, you know, Mocha, I've got your back. And Mocha is tough. And there have been folks who were trying to smear this brilliant candidate because she has stood up to demand change and to put herself forward to represent her community. So Mocha, congratulations on your run. Look forward to seeing you win, and thank you for the question. And I also happen to know that affordable housing is an issue that you, Representative Frye, have in so many ways taken the lead on in our General Assembly. For my part, what I'll say is this. We had a housing crisis in Georgia before COVID-19 hit. Right now, we have an imminent homelessness crisis because all of those eviction protections at the federal level have expired. And once again, the Senate is on vacation and families are having trouble making rent. There are no additional stimulus checks apparently forthcoming from Washington. Once again, corporate America and Wall Street, if they face a liquidity crisis, the help comes overnight. Ordinary American families face a liquidity crisis. Looking at insolvency or bankruptcy during a crisis like this, the Senate's on vacation. But even before COVID-19, so many families across Georgia have had trouble paying rent. And it's especially true in some of our fastest growing metro areas where deeply rooted, long established communities are facing displacement due to the rapid economic growth tied with the lack of investment in mixed income housing and affordable housing. In the Senate, as part of a major infrastructure bill, I will deliver resources for affordable housing in Georgia. And I'll work with leaders like Representative Frye to ensure that folks aren't displaced by the skyrocketing costs of home ownership and rental. And Spencer, over to you to talk a bit more about your work in the General Assembly and how you see this issue, please.
Well, I mean, certainly we've been, the housing crisis that you spoke of, it's been an issue that has been just a string of failed federal policies since the GI Bill, going into the redlining, and you come all the way back up to the creation of family wealth and generational wealth is what has sustained these oligarch-like families that get into the dark money politics that you were talking about and referring to. And I think lowering the threshold of the ability to enter this market is what I've been working on for a long time. The trick is getting the right people elected into office that are going to make commitments towards this type of policy. And a lot of what you're saying about the Senate being in recess and they're on vacation right now is when we're in the middle of a pandemic, for your opponent to be out of office and not working towards people's livelihoods and helping the American citizens is just absolutely just mind-boggling to me. We've got another
Spencer,
question.
Can you imagine being a sitting U.S. senator? Your solemn obligation is to look out for the interests of the people of the state of Georgia. You look around at the state of the world right now and say, you know what, I think we've earned a vacation. It blows my mind. I could not imagine
that. Yeah, I know. I would argue with whoever decided that until I was blue in the face and would still be up there in my office trying to solve some of these issues, because people in this country are looking for real leadership, and they're looking for people who can be honest and true to their word. And I'm preaching to the choir. I'm so happy you're running.
But it also is this partisanship thing, because Senator Perdue is too fearful of Mitch McConnell to raise much of a ruckus about this. I mean, he might say, oh, well, we should be working. But Mitch McConnell's own Republican conference needs to hold his feet to the fire. They need to fly back to Washington right now and demand that the Senate re-enter session.
No, that's exactly right. And the people of America are hurting right now. And the people of Georgia are hurting right now. And for our elected officials not to be working towards those issues to solve these problems, I think the mayor of Winterville actually said it best when he said to me, Spencer, I don't follow men who do not have integrity. And that's what we're seeing right now. It's a very difficult situation. But we've got another question from Mark, and which is our last question. Y'all, Mark from Valdosta is wondering, do you think it's important that the Secretary of Education has actual public school teaching experience, or to maybe they should have at least attended public school sometime in their life?
I think it would be great to have a school teacher with experience teaching in public schools as a Secretary of Education. It would be a lot more sensible than what we have now in Betsy DeVos, who's an avowed enemy of public education, who is trying to push for-profit education instead of public education, and who doesn't have teachers' backs. So yeah, Mark, I think that would make a lot of sense. At the very least, it should be someone who believes in public education, which is not what we have now. And Mark, it's also worth noting, while we're talking about teachers and schools, that the Senate has also failed to deliver any emergency resources for Georgia schools that are trying to reopen in the middle of this pandemic. No emergency resources to help teachers, school administrators, principals, and families prepare to help schools meet public health guidelines issued by the CDC, or to engage in remote learning in a fruitful way. They're just falling down on the job. But yes, Mark, and hello to everyone in Valdosta. I think it would be really, really logical and sensible to have a Secretary of Education with experience teaching in our public school system.
Yeah, I agree, 100%. That was our last question. And Jon, I just want to tell you what an honor it is for me to be able to speak with you about these things, and to hear questions across the state of Georgia and from Athens, and to hear your answers, and for you to be reflecting the leadership that I believe that this country needs right now. And do you have any closing remarks for everybody that was tuning in?
Well, Representative, I want to thank you for your leadership and your highly effective representation of your constituents. You have been such an important provider of vital public health information through this whole crisis. You've used all of your channels and all of the means of reaching out to your constituents, and really folks across the state, to keep people informed about what's going on. So I'm thankful to you for taking some time out of your busy schedule to moderate this. And to everyone out there who is watching, participated, asked questions, thank you. I'm sorry we couldn't get to every question. We're doing these weekly. We can never get to every question that's asked, and I'm grateful that folks are so engaged. We're doing our best during this time to make sure that this campaign is accessible and transparent and responsive and answerable to the people, even while it would not be prudent for us to be bringing folks together in enclosed spaces for this kind of thing in the interest of public health. So, and that's the kind of representation that I'll bring to my service in the U.S. Senate representing our state. Public officials have an obligation to put themselves out there, to answer questions, tough questions, to answer criticism, to subject themselves to scrutiny, to explain their votes and their actions and their positions, and to be open to change and hearing different views. And I will be a representative in the U.S. Senate for all the people of the state and all of our diversity. And I just hope everyone out there is weathering the storm as well you can, praying for your good health. And thank you again, Spencer, for making this possible. Much love, man.
You too, John. Take care.